It started with a letter, tucked into our mailbox on a breezy Wednesday morning. At first, we thought it was another seasonal reminder from the HOA about lawn maintenance or garbage schedules. But this one felt different, the paper heavier, the wording more severe. Amanda read it aloud while I stood at the sink, rinsing out our coffee mugs. Notice of violation, Blackwell residents. They claimed our 100-year-old oak tree posed a safety hazard and demanded its immediate removal. Amanda's brow furrowed. That tree was inspected last year. It's healthy. We'd moved to this neighborhood for its quiet charm and historic beauty. The oak tree was part of that. Its sprawling branches shaded half the block in summer and cradled squirrels, birds, and childhood memories. Tyler, our son, had built his first treehouse there. I called the number listed on the notice, expecting a mistake. Instead, I reached Walter Brooks, newly appointed head of the HOA Compliance Committee. His tone was curt. "Mr. Blackwell, the arborist's report speaks for itself. That tree is dangerous. We've given you ample time to act." I asked for a copy of the report. He refused. Amanda filed a formal request the same day. Silence. The following week, we received a second letter, this time threatening fines and legal action. Amanda, a former Navy logistics officer, began keeping a meticulous binder. Every letter, every call, every email logged and timestamped. Then came the warning signs. One evening, returning from a grocery run, I found a bright orange sticker pasted on our front door. Final notice. Walter stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed. "You're not above the rules," he called out. "This isn't the military." Amanda stepped onto the porch, calm, composed. "We're not asking for special treatment, just proof." The next day, the kids found broken branches under the tree that hadn't been there the night before. Amanda installed cameras. 2 nights later, the footage showed a man in a hoodie tossing something into the yard. A closer look revealed it was a rusted saw blade. That weekend, we decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting. We'd kept to ourselves, mostly Amanda, busy with her remote job, me managing my small carpentry business, Tyler navigating middle school. But now, we were drawn into something deeper. The meeting was held at the Maple Creek Community Center. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, rows of folding chairs. Walter stood at the podium, flanked by Victoria Hamilton, the HOA president. Impeccably dressed, polite smile, eyes that scanned like radar. When it came time for community comments, I stood. "We're asking to see the arborist report used to declare our tree a hazard." A pause. Victoria responded. "The HOA acted on professional advice. Details are confidential." Amanda stood beside me. "There is no confidentiality clause that overrides a homeowner's right to documentation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. We weren't the only ones with concerns. After the meeting, a woman named Melissa Parker approached us. She'd lived 2 streets over until her property was suddenly cited for multiple violations after she refused to sell to a developer. Her story mirrored ours. We began to suspect something more was happening. Late-night talks with neighbors revealed a pattern: targeted citations, pressure to sell, mysterious appraisals. Amanda reached out to Daniel Foster, a lawyer she'd worked with during her service. He agreed to review the HOA's bylaws and documentation. Then came the unthinkable. It was a Tuesday afternoon when 2 uniformed men knocked on our door. "Court order to inspect and remove the tree," one said, flashing a badge. Amanda studied the document. Something was off. She called the county. No record of any court order. The badge numbers didn't check out. Within an hour, real deputies arrived. The men were gone. Fraudulent officers. Fake documents. Amanda and I sat in stunned silence. That night, Tyler cried himself to sleep. He thought the treehouse would be gone by morning. We knew then we weren't just dealing with overzealous neighbors. This was systemic, coordinated, possibly criminal. Amanda doubled down. She created a shared folder for evidence. Neighbors. began contributing. Photos, letters, videos. Daniel found discrepancies in the HOA's financial statements, missing funds, unapproved contracts, and Victoria still smiled at community picnics, still issued fines with surgical precision. But her grip was slipping. We were no longer isolated. Melissa returned with a sworn affidavit. Another neighbor, Mark Reynolds, an investigative journalist, offered to help. He began tracing land transactions. Multiple homes in our neighborhood had been bought by a shell corporation tied to a firm called Pinnacle Development. Pinnacle wanted to build luxury condos, but they needed the land, and they needed our 3-hour lot gone. One night, Amanda stood in the yard, staring up at the oak. "They picked the wrong family," she whispered. I took her hand. The battle had begun. "If you can expose what you've learned at this meeting in front of all the homeowners, Victoria's power base could crumble." We had 3 days to prepare our defense and counterattack. The battle lines were drawn, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Our home, our community, standing, and apparently the fate of our beloved oak tree. But Victoria and Walter had made a critical error in their calculations. They'd chosen to go to war with 2 career military strategists who knew how to prepare for battle. "Time to organize our intelligence," Amanda said decisively, spreading our evidence across the dining room table. "Let's show them what happens when you bring a ruler to a gunfight." The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Thursday, deliberately inconvenient for working families, which was undoubtedly part of Victoria's strategy. Amanda took a rare day off to prepare while I worked remotely to finalize our documentation. We decided against hiring an attorney, despite Daniel's recommendation. "They'll expect legal representation," Amanda had reasoned, "but they won't expect us to be more prepared than their own lawyer." We understood bureaucratic warfare and document-based battles better than most civilians. It had been our daily reality for years in the military. Victoria had secured Ryan Harrison, a slick HOA attorney known for aggressive tactics against homeowners. His reputation preceded him. He'd helped multiple associations force out problematic residents through legal intimidation. What Victoria didn't know was that Amanda had thoroughly researched his case history, identifying patterns in his arguments and several instances where he'd overreached and lost when challenged properly. The atmosphere in the clubhouse that evening was tense, with a larger turnout than usual. Curious neighbors filled the chairs while Victoria and the board sat at their elevated table, looking smugly confident. Ryan Harrison sat beside them, his expensive suit and carefully arranged legal documents projecting an air of unassailable authority. We took our seats in the front row, calm and prepared, which seemed to momentarily unsettle Victoria. She clearly expected us to appear intimidated. "This emergency session addresses the ongoing violations at the Blackwell residence," Victoria began without preamble. "Due to the frequency and severity of infractions, the board has authorized legal proceedings." She nodded to Harrison, who stood and distributed packets to the board members. "These homeowners have demonstrated consistent disregard for community standards," he declared, "including unauthorized landscaping, improper maintenance, and most seriously, refusal to address the hazardous oak tree that violates height and safety regulations." Harrison projected images onto the wall, carefully angled photos, making our well-maintained property look unkempt, complete with red circles highlighting supposed violations. "Most concerning," he continued smoothly, "is the independent arborist report, confirming the oak presents an imminent safety hazard to surrounding properties." He displayed an official-looking document with charts indicating structural weakness in the tree. "The association has no choice but to demand immediate removal, with daily fines of $1,000 until compliance is achieved." When it was finally our turn to respond, I stood calmly, thanking the board for the opportunity to address these concerns. "First," I began, "I'd like to verify the credentials of the arborist who prepared this report." Harrison smirked, producing a certificate. Martin Consulting, fully licensed and bonded. Their assessment is beyond question. I nodded thoughtfully before responding. Interesting. Since Martin Consulting went out of business 18 months ago. The room fell silent as I projected an official state business dissolution notice onto the wall. This report is forged, which constitutes fraud in legal proceedings. I could see Harrison's confident expression falter as Amanda stood beside me, distributing our own documentation to board members and interested homeowners. Furthermore, she continued seamlessly, the original community covenant explicitly protects heritage oaks as community assets. She displayed Eleanor's historical records highlighting the relevant sections. This protection predates and supersedes any subsequent amendments about height restrictions. For the next 20 minutes, we methodically dismantled each accusation, producing photographic evidence contradicting their claims about our property's condition, citing relevant county ordinances that took precedence over HOA rules, and finally, revealing the documented connection between Victoria, Councilmember Matthews, and Pinnacle Development. The shocked murmurs from the audience grew as we presented financial records, showing questionable allocation of HOA funds, coinciding with consulting payments from the developer. Victoria's face had transformed from confident to furious. "This is absurd," she interrupted, her voice rising. "These military people are fabricating conspiracy theories because they can't be bothered to follow simple rules like everyone else." She looked to Harrison for support, but the attorney was frantically reviewing our documentation, clearly caught off guard by the thoroughness of our response. The judge presiding over the hearing, whom Harrison had likely expected to be a rubber stamp, studied the conflicting reports with growing concern. "These are serious allegations on both sides," she finally said. "I'm granting a 2-week continuance for proper verification of these documents and claims." She fixed Harrison with a stern look, "and I expect confirmation of that arborist's credentials and an explanation for the discrepancy noted by Mr. Blackwell." It became apparent that the noise of my systems might cause them some permanent damage, as the meeting dissolved into heated discussions among homeowners. Walter cornered Victoria near the exit, their heated whispers just audible from where I stood, gathering our materials. "This is getting out of control," he hissed. "They've got too much. We need to move to Plan B before they find the zoning applications." Victoria's response chilled me. "Take care of it tomorrow. I don't care how. Just make them understand they're not welcome here anymore." Their expressions as they looked our way contained something more dangerous than mere annoyance. There was desperation now, and desperation often led to reckless actions. Daniel approached us as we headed to our car, his expression grave. "You've rattled them, and that's dangerous," he warned. "Victoria doesn't lose gracefully. Watch yourselves." Amanda nodded, her military training evident in her alert posture and scanning gaze. "We're well aware," she replied. "The cameras are running 24/7, and I've added motion sensors. They won't catch us unprepared." What none of us realized then was just how far Victoria and Walter were willing to go and how soon they would make their desperate move. 2 days after the hearing, I had to attend an overnight engineering conference in Atlanta. I'd been reluctant to leave given the escalating situation, but Amanda had insisted. "We can't put our lives on hold because of their intimidation tactics," she'd reasoned. "Besides, I'm perfectly capable of handling any situation that arises." As a military security commander, she certainly was. But neither of us anticipated exactly what form Victoria's Plan B would take. She reached over and took my hand. Besides, Victoria picked the wrong enemies. We faced worse than a power-hungry HOA president and her rent-a-cop sidekick. As we prepared our final strategies late into the night, we received an unexpected call from Tiffany. "You need to know something before tomorrow's meeting," she said, her voice urgent. "We've discovered Victoria filed an actual court order today. Legitimate one, this time using the same fraudulent arborist report about your oak tree being hazardous. The judge who signed it wasn't aware of the ongoing investigation, or the document fraud allegations. Technically, it's a valid inspection order, until challenged in court. Victoria's final play was both desperate and cunning, using the legitimate legal system to accomplish what her criminal attempt had failed to do. She's trying to create legal cover for what Walter did. Amanda realized. If there's a valid court order, they can argue the fake officers were just a misunderstanding rather than an intentional criminal act. We spent the next hour on the phone with Daniel, developing a strategy to counter this latest maneuver. The HOA meeting was no longer just about clearing our names. It had become our opportunity to expose the entire conspiracy before Victoria could establish her misleading narrative. The clubhouse was packed beyond capacity for the emergency meeting. Word had spread throughout the neighborhood about the fake police incident, with rumors and speculation running wild. Victoria sat at the center of the board table, composed and confident as ever, with Ryan Harrison beside her preparing legal documents. Walter's seat remained conspicuously empty. He had apparently called in sick, unwilling to face the community. After the police search of his home, I noticed several unfamiliar faces scattered throughout the audience, including a stern-looking man in a well-tailored suit who I later learned was FBI Agent Mitchell. Victoria called the meeting to order with practiced authority, acknowledging the larger-than-usual attendance with a thin smile. We're here to address ongoing serious violations at the Blackwell property and to authorize final legal action, she began smoothly, despite numerous notices and opportunities to comply. These homeowners have consistently defied community standards, culminating in their dangerous refusal to remove a hazardous tree that threatens surrounding property. Ryan Harrison stood to distribute packets to board members. As you can see, we now have a court-ordered inspection and potential removal authorization for the oak tree in question, he announced, projecting the document onto the wall screen. A county judge has reviewed the evidence and found merit in our safety concerns. Furthermore, he continued with a pointed look in our direction. Any attempts to obstruct this legal order will result in contempt charges. Victoria's smile took on a victorious edge as she added, "There have been some unfortunate misunderstandings recently regarding enforcement procedures. The board regrets any confusion, but wants to emphasize that all actions taken have been in the community's best interest and within legal boundaries. Now we'll proceed with a vote to allocate funds for enforcement of the court order and potential legal fees." It was the moment we'd been preparing for. I stood to address the room, feeling Amanda's reassuring presence beside me. "Before any vote occurs, we have important information the entire community needs to hear," I began calmly. What Victoria characterizes as unfortunate misunderstandings was actually criminal impersonation of law enforcement officers with fraudulent documents, orchestrated by board member Walter Brooks at Victoria's direction. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as Officer Tiffany Wells stepped forward in full uniform. "I'm Officer Wells with the County Sheriff's Department," she announced. "Two individuals were arrested at the Blackwell residence for impersonating police officers and presenting fraudulent court documents. They have provided sworn statements identifying Walter Brooks as the person who hired them to intimidate the Blackwells and force access to their property." She proceeded to outline the criminal investigation, confirming that Walter was currently under investigation for multiple felonies. Victoria's face had drained of color, but she quickly recovered. "This is absurd," she interjected. "Walter may have exercised poor judgment in hiring private security, but any suggestion of criminality or board involvement is preposterous. We have a legitimate court order now, which proves our concerns were valid all along." Amanda stepped forward then, her naval security credentials visible on her lapel. "That court order was obtained using the same fraudulent arborist report that we disproved in the previous meeting," she stated, projecting both documents side by side. "Martin Consulting, the supposed author of this report, ceased operations 18 months ago. We have confirmation from the state licensing board that no legitimate arborist has inspected our tree. She turned to address the homeowners directly, but this goes far beyond a dispute about a tree. With practiced precision, Amanda and I laid out the full conspiracy we'd uncovered, supported by Daniel's documentation and Mark's investigative findings. We revealed Victoria's financial connection to Pinnacle Development, the pattern of harassment against homeowners whose property stood in the way of development plans, and the misuse of HOA funds to finance these efforts. Mark Reynolds stood to confirm his newspaper would be publishing an expose the following day, complete with financial records and sworn statements from previous victims, like Melissa Parker. The atmosphere in the room transformed. Shocked gasps and angry murmurs replaced the usual deferential silence that accompanied Victoria's proclamations. Several homeowners stood to share their own experiences of selective enforcement and intimidation. Emboldened by our stand, Nancy Sullivan, trembling visibly but determined, confirmed that Victoria had directed her to falsify meeting minutes and financial records on multiple occasions. "I was afraid of losing my job," she admitted tearfully, "but I can't be part of this anymore." Victoria's carefully constructed faca began crumbling before our eyes. "These are malicious fabrications," she insisted, her voice rising with desperation. "This military family moved in and immediately started causing problems, refusing to follow simple rules that everyone else manages to obey. They've concocted this elaborate conspiracy theory because they're too stubborn to remove one dangerous tree." Her tirade was interrupted by the unexpected appearance of Councilmember Matthews, who had slipped into the back of the room during the presentations. "I want to clarify that my involvement with Pinnacle Development has always been properly disclosed and entirely above board," he announced nervously, clearly trying to distance himself from Victoria. "Any suggestion that zoning decisions were influenced by improper considerations is categorically false." This desperate attempt at damage control was immediately undermined when FBI agent Mitchell identified himself, approaching Matthews with a cordial but firm demeanor. "Councilman, I believe we should continue this conversation downtown. We have some questions about certain financial transactions between your office and Pinnacle subsidiaries." The councilman's face fell as he realized his political career was likely over. The final blow came when Eleanor Turner, supported by her walker and accompanied by several longtime residents, presented the original community covenant and historical records proving the heritage oaks were protected in the founding documents. Victoria knew this, she stated firmly. "I showed her these records when she first started pressing the Parkers about their tree. She deliberately ignored the covenant to pursue her development deals." Victoria, seeing her position completely undermined, made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "As board president, I'm adjourning this meeting immediately," she declared, gathering her papers. "These allegations will be addressed through proper legal channels, not in this, a regular forum." She gestured urgently to Ryan Harrison, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Daniel Foster stood in response. "Point of order," he called firmly. "HOA bylaws allow for emergency removal of board members when evidence of malfeasance is presented. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in President Hamilton and temporary suspension pending full investigation of these allegations." The motion was seconded immediately by multiple homeowners, and despite Victoria's protests, the vote proceeded. The result was overwhelming, 38-3 in favor of removing Victoria from her position. As Victoria was escorted from the clubhouse by Officer Wells for questioning, the community erupted in applause. Daniel was elected interim president by unanimous consent, with a mandate to conduct a full audit of HOA finances and operations. Ryan Harrison quietly slipped out during the confusion, distancing himself from his disgraced client. The FBI took Councilmember Matthews aside for a formal interview while Mark Reynolds collected final statements for his article. In the aftermath, our oak tree was officially designated a protected heritage tree by unanimous vote of the new HOA board. The planned expansion of the Pinnacle development was halted pending investigation, and Victoria faced multiple criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Walter eventually accepted a plea deal, testifying against Victoria in exchange for reduced charges. That final meeting wasn't just a turning point, it was a reckoning. Victoria's empire collapsed in front of the very people she once controlled with threats, false fines, and carefully cultivated fear. What had started as a battle over a single oak tree ended up exposing years of corruption, collusion, and abuse of power that stretched far beyond our block. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects spread quickly. The HOA board launched an independent audit under Daniel's direction. What they uncovered confirmed every suspicion: misallocated dues, shell invoices, contracts awarded to companies owned by Victoria's relatives, and thousands of dollars missing from community improvement funds. Residents who had remained silent during Victoria's reign finally stepped forward, some with regret, others with relief. A retired couple admitted they'd paid extra compliance fees just to avoid inspections. A single mother revealed how she'd been fined repeatedly until she was forced to sell her house, eventually bought by a Pinnacle development subsidiary. Daniel brought in a forensic accountant. The results were damning. Victoria had been siphoning off funds for years. So had Walter. Even Ryan Harrison, her legal puppet, was found to be billing the HOA for services never rendered. Local news outlets picked up Mark Reynolds' article, then regional outlets, then a segment aired on a national investigative show. Suddenly, Maple Creek wasn't just a quiet suburban community. It was a symbol of grassroots resistance and accountability. Victoria was arrested again, this time under federal charges: fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Walter, under pressure, gave a full deposition. His testimony confirmed that Pinnacle had promised Victoria a six-figure payout if she could clear at least 8 homes off the development map. Our home was number 4 on that list. Councilman Matthews resigned before formal charges hit. His resignation letter was read aloud at a city council meeting, but it couldn't mask the disgrace. His political career was over. For us, the quiet returned, but not the same kind of quiet. It was better now. Neighbors waved when they passed. Kids played openly on the sidewalks again. People spoke freely, no longer worried they'd be targeted next. Amanda joined the new HOA board as vice president. Daniel remained president until the next election, ensuring reforms were implemented. Monthly meetings now included open forums. Budgets were posted online. Transparency was no longer just a word, it was a promise. Tyler's nature club grew. He gave a small speech at the next community event, thanking everyone for protecting the tree and calling it our neighborhood guardian. It made Amanda cry. It made me proud. As for the oak tree, a local historical society partnered with the HOA to preserve it permanently. A small plaque now sits at its base. This tree stood through storms, seasons, and schemes, protected by those who refused to be silenced. Life moved forward. Amanda returned to consulting. I took on a few new carpentry projects, and we even helped Melissa Parker return to the neighborhood. A neighbor had offered to rent her the guest house out back, free for a year. The wounds healed slowly, but they healed honestly. Sometimes, in the evenings, Amanda and I would sit under that oak tree with a glass of tea and just listen. No yelling, no threats, just wind through the branches and the sound of laughter from the block. One night, she looked over at me and smiled. You know, if we hadn't fought back, we'd just let them cut it down, we'd never have seen any of this. Seen what? I asked. She gestured around. All of it. The truth. The people. The fight in this place. I nodded, watching Tyler and a few of his friends chase fireflies under the tree's wide arms. We just wanted to protect what mattered, I said. And that, she replied, is exactly what we did. Summer came full and green. The oak tree, once at the center of conflict, now stood taller than ever, its limbs, no longer a battleground, but a banner of triumph. Amanda organized a neighborhood cleanup weekend. Families brought tools, food, even music. We cleared overgrown paths, painted fences, and replanted the community garden Victoria had left to weeds. It was hard work, but it felt good. Nist, shared, real. One morning, as I was fixing the old bench under the oak, a boy I didn't recognize rode by on his bike and shouted, "Thanks for saving the tree, mister." I smiled and waved, but the truth was, we had all saved it, every neighbor who stood up, every voice that refused to be silenced. Melissa Parker returned with a quiet dignity. Amanda gave her the binder we'd used to collect evidence, now organized and sealed with tabs and photos. "This helped bring the truth out," she said. "Maybe it can help you too." Melissa hugged her, and they both cried. The HOA board underwent sweeping reforms. Daniel proposed a homeowner's Bill of Rights, passed unanimously. Fines now required photographic proof. All contractors had to be pre-approved by vote. Every board decision had to be published and archived. But perhaps most importantly, people cared again. No longer passive residents, they had become stewards of their own community. Even those who had once sided with Victoria began to change. One elderly man who had voted against us every time quietly donated $1,000 to the community garden. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I didn't see what was happening, but you did." Mark Reynolds Expose won a regional journalism award. In his acceptance speech, he thanked the ordinary homeowners who did extraordinary things. The article was eventually cited in a congressional hearing on HOA reform. One evening, Tyler asked if he could invite his nature club friends over for a stargazing sleepover under the oak. Amanda and I agreed, and that night we watched from the kitchen window as tents popped up under the branches, their laughter rising like fireflies. Later, Amanda whispered, "Do you think Victoria ever thought she'd build unity by trying to destroy it?" I chuckled. "Probably not. But irony's got a sense of humor. Victoria's trial was long and public. She pled not guilty to 12 counts, but the evidence was overwhelming: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, obstruction. Walter's testimony sealed her fate. She was sentenced to 6 years, with the possibility of parole in 4. Her name became a cautionary tale in HOA legal seminars across the state. Ryan Harrison lost his license to practice law for 5 years. Councilman Matthews faded into obscurity, never to run again, and us. We didn't move. We didn't need to. This place had changed not because of the battle, but because people remembered how to stand. Amanda was offered a leadership role on a regional HOA advisory council. She accepted, saying, "If it helps one family avoid what we went through, it's worth it." Sometimes I'd still get calls from neighbors asking how to handle a citation or review a document. I never minded. We weren't just neighbors. Anymore, we were a network, a community, a real one. On the 1-year anniversary of that final meeting, the neighborhood threw a block party. Tyler stood on a folding chair and gave a speech. This tree was here before us, and it'll be here after us. But what we did we'll always remember. People clapped. Amanda wiped a tear. I raised my glass. "To the oak," someone shouted. "To the truth," another added. But I smiled and said what I truly meant, to the fight and the peace that came after. And under that sprawling canopy, our lives unfolded full of light, laughter, and the knowledge that when you stand for what's right, no force, no HOA, no threat, no corrupt plan can uproot the truth. Not even close.